the king of curses, the strongest sorcerer in history. A being so powerful that even death couldn't contain him. But when the dust settled in Shinjuku, Ryomen Sukuna met an end that nobody saw coming. Not a warrior's death, not a legendary final stand. Something far more profound, far more tragic, and honestly, far more fitting for a creature who spent 1,000 years convinced of his own supremacy. So what actually happened to Sukuna? And more importantly, what does his fate reveal about the entire philosophy of Jujutsu Kaisen itself? Let me take you through the complete rise and fall of the most compelling villain in modern anime, because understanding Sukuna's end means understanding everything this series has been building toward from Chapter 1. Sukuna's story isn't just about a villain getting defeated, it's about a fundamental question that Jujutsu Kaisen has been asking since the beginning. What does it mean to be strong? What does it mean to live? And when you've convinced yourself that strength is everything, what happens when that strength finally fails you? Sukuna's journey from the Heian era to his final moments in Shinjuku is a masterclass in tragic character development, and by the end of this, you'll see why his defeat had to happen exactly the way it did. We're going deep into his abilities, his philosophy, his relationships, and the symbolic weight of his final choice. And yes, there will be manga spoilers, so consider yourself warned. Let's start with who Sukuna actually was. During the Heian era, the golden age of Jujutsu, Sukuna wasn't just strong, he was the pinnacle. Born with 4 arms, 4 eyes, and an unprecedented connection to cursed energy, he mastered every technique he encountered. Shrine, cleave and dismantle, domain expansion. He even learned to use reverse curse technique to heal himself, something most sorcerers never achieve. But here's what made Sukuna truly terrifying. He didn't just defeat his opponents, he consumed them. 20 fingers, 20 pieces of his soul scattered across time itself, because even after death, he refused to fade away. When Yuji Itadori swallowed that first finger in Sendai, Sukuna didn't just revive. He found something he hadn't had in 1,000 years, possibility, a chance to walk the earth again. And he seized it with the same ruthless efficiency that defined his entire existence. Throughout the Shibuya incident, we saw glimpses of Sukuna's true nature. His fight with Jogo wasn't a battle, it was a demonstration. Sukuna didn't just overpower the special grade curse, he toyed with him, amused by Jogo's futile attempts at resistance. That moment when he cut through Jogo's meteor with casual dismissal, that was Sukuna's worldview in action. Strength isn't about effort, it's about absolute dominance, and if you can't dominate, you're worthless. But Shibuya also revealed something crucial. When Sukuna took control and carved through civilians to draw out Megumi, we saw the depth of his interest in the 10 Shadows technique. This wasn't random cruelty, this was strategy. Sukuna had recognized something in Megumi's inherited technique that aligned with his goals, and from that moment, the King of Curses began playing a much longer game. The culling game changed everything. When Sukuna transferred into Megumi's body, it seemed like the ultimate victory. He'd escaped Yuji's interference and gained access to the 10 Shadows, including the ability to summon Mahoraga. But here's the irony that makes Sukuna's story so brilliant. The moment he thought he'd won was actually the beginning of his downfall. In Megumi's body, Sukuna reached heights of power that even his original form might not have achieved. He adapted Mahoraga's abilities to develop new techniques. He refined his domain to counter Gojo Satoru's unlimited void. When he bisected Gojo with World Cutting Slash, it appeared he'd overcome the one obstacle that could challenge his supremacy. The strongest modern sorcerer, defeated. The King of Curses, triumphant. But Gojo's death wasn't the climax of Sukuna's arc. It was the setup for his real test. The Shinjuku Showdown became a war of attrition that Sukuna had never experienced before. Yuji, Yuta, Maki, Higuruma, Kusakabe, every available sorcerer threw themselves at him in coordinated waves. And here's what's crucial to understand. They weren't trying to overpower Sukuna. They were trying to outlast him. Every technique Sukuna used degraded Megumi's body further. Every domain expansion pushed him closer to burnout. Every adaptation through Mahoraga consumed more cursed energy. For the first time in his existence, Sukuna was being forced to fight a battle he couldn't end quickly. And in that grinding warfare, something unprecedented happened. He started to weaken. Yuji's evolution became the key. Throughout the series, Yuji had been dismissed as the vessel, the cage, the ordinary human who happened to house a god. But in Shinjuku, Yuji became something Sukuna never anticipated, a genuine threat. Soul-dismantling strikes that bypassed conventional durability, a domain expansion of his own. And most devastating of all, an unbreakable will that refused to give Sukuna even a moment's peace. When Nobara returned and landed resonance on Sukuna's final finger, it wasn't just a physical attack. It was symbolic destruction. The part of Sukuna that had endured for 1,000 years, reduced and vulnerable. Combined with Yuji's relentless assault, Sukuna found himself in unfamiliar territory, losing. But the Gen tragedy of Sukuna's end isn't the physical defeat. It's the philosophical one. In his final moments, separated from Megumi and reduced back to his cursed object form, Sukuna had a choice. Yuji offered him something nobody had offered in a millennium. Acceptance. Not as the king of curses. Not as the strongest. But as someone who could choose a different path. And Sukuna refused. Even facing complete annihilation, even recognizing that his philosophy of strength had led him to isolation and defeat, Sukuna couldn't let go of who he was. He acknowledged Yuji's strength. He even seemed to understand, for just a moment, that there might be value in connection, in human bonds, in the very things he dismissed as weakness. But in the end, he chose to fade away as the king of curses rather than accept salvation as anything less. That's what makes his fate so devastating. Sukuna didn't lose because he was weak. He lost because his definition of strength was fundamentally incomplete. He spent 1,000 years believing that power meant isolation, that dominance meant supremacy, that being the strongest meant being alone at the top. And when faced with an opponent who drew strength from connections, from trust, from the very bonds Sukuna dismissed, the king of curses discovered that his philosophy had a fatal flaw. The final panel of Sukuna shows him walking away, back turned to Yuji's offer. He goes south, while Yuji suggested north. Even in metaphorical death, Sukuna refuses to follow anyone else's path. It's defiant, it's tragic, and it's perfectly in character. So what does Sukuna's fate tell us about Jujutsu Kaisen's message? It's this: strength without purpose, power without connection, dominance without meaning, all of it leads to the same place. An empty victory followed by lonely defeat. Sukuna was the strongest, but Yuji, with all his supposed weakness and human limitation, is the one who gets to keep living, keep connecting, keep growing. The king of curses is gone, but the boy who housed him continues forward, carrying the lessons learned from hosting a god and choosing humanity anyway. Sukuna's end wasn't about good triumphing over evil. It was about philosophy meeting consequence. And in a series that's always questioned what it means to be strong, watching the strongest character fail because of his own worldview might be the most powerful statement Gege Akutami could make. The king of curses is dead. But the question he embodied, about strength and isolation and the price of power, that's going to echo through Jujutsu Kaisen until the very end.